What is up, guys? Dzeeff here, and I love Beetroopers. This deck is not really like the decks that I normally enjoy. It doesn't play really any back row cards, but it is so much fun winning with these wacky insect monsters that really have never gotten a chance to see competitive play. I love the new Beetrooper cards themselves, but also I like the deck that they're played in. I really think that Konami went above and beyond with the Beetrooper cards. They seemed to really want them to be competitively viable. Now, right now, they're not quite a meta contender, but I have been playing them for the past few weeks, and I've played them at a couple locals, and I think they have a ton of potential. Keep in mind here, this deck is about to get a lot better, so in 2 weeks, we have Crossout Designator, which helps counter Nibiru, which is currently this deck's biggest issue, and then after that, in Burst of Destiny, we have more Beetrooper support. Now, at this point, we don't know what those Beetrooper support cards look like, but if they're half as good as these ones, I think Beetroopers are going to be a very competitive deck. Right now, we're playing every single Beetrooper card that was released in Dawn of Majesty, so that is a really good sign that Konami wants this deck to be competitive. Now, my list is not perfect, it is still a work in progress, but I wanted to show you guys what I've been playing because I know people know that I like this deck, and I haven't really done a deck profile on the channel up until this point. I do have an older gameplay video on my channel from a few weeks ago if you guys are interested in checking that out, where you can see some of the basic combos. But anyway, let's go through here and I'll kind of talk about my card choices. I should mention I don't have the most expensive Beetrooper deck, but I definitely am not playing a budget build, but I will point out a bunch of cards you can swap out if you want it to be a little bit more budget friendly. First up, of course, we have 3 copies of Beetrooper Scout Buggy. This is your main starter card. You want to open this with like every single opening hand. Such a great support card that you can also bring out of the deck with your Atlas effect as well if you want to end on a rank 3 monster. Love Scout Buggy. It is a great insect monster just in general, but obviously it's especially good in a Beetrooper deck. Then we have 3 copies of Beetrooper Scale Bomber. This is probably one of your best extenders because it can chain block some of your important effects. You can go like Scout Buggy Chainlink 1, Scale Bomber Chainlink 2, so they can't ash the Scout Buggy. Next up, we have 2 copies of Sting Lancer. I love this card. I really do want to play 3. I've seen deck profiles that play 1, 2, and 3 copies of this card, and I think all of those are right, which sounds weird, but it's really a flexible spot right here because, yeah, you do have plenty of ways to search or special summon the Sting Lancer, so I can understand only playing 1 copy, but it's such a good like extender if you have a starter in your hand. That might sound kind of weird, but it's like once you put an insect in the graveyard, Sting Lancer is one of your best cards because then you can use that as like a hand trap, and you can also use it as an extender to search a spell and trap card as well as put a body on the board. So I do like drawing it, but I think that 3 copies might be a bit too much. Next up, we have 3 copies of Battle Wasp Sting the Poison. I don't know if the Battle Wasp cards will always be in Beetroopers. I mean, we'll have to wait and see with the new supports, but right now this is one of your best normal summons. It searches an extender, and also it's a card you can revive on your opponent's turn with the Papillon effect to put a negation on your board. And then we have 3 copies of Pin the Bullseye. Very good extender card. As you can see, this deck has a number of extenders. That's what makes it so much fun. I will mention with this deck right now, one of the biggest advantages here is that your opponents probably won't know what your combos are trying to accomplish, so they might hit some of your earlier cards that don't matter as much. Maybe they hand trap the wrong card and not realizing you have so many extenders, and you can keep comboing off. So keep that in mind. One of the reasons to play any rogue deck just in general, but especially this deck right now, is that your opponent might not know what your deck is trying to accomplish. We also play 1 copy of a Twin Bow the Attacker. I hate this card. I never really want to search it, but sometimes you need to add it when you already have the Pin the Bullseye and you open Sting alongside of it. But I mean, it's fine at 1 copy, I guess. But it's a card that restricts you to only special summoning insects for the rest of the turn, which does limit your plays a lot. We also have 1 copy of Rapid Fire. Great card for searching off of Sting as a follow-up play, and sometimes it can be useful in your turn 1 combo if you don't have a lot of insect monsters. Next up, of course, 3 copies of Resonance Insect. Yes, this is the card that makes the deck broken. It has 2 great non-once per turn effects. When it goes to the graveyard from the field, you get to add a level 5 or higher insect monster from your deck to your hand, and then when it's banished, you get to Foolish Burial an insect monster. 2 great effects. I would like to see a Beetrooper support card that has has a graveyard effect that's relevant so that you could get more value out of your Resonance Insect. Right now, Gokipole is your really big target that you're trying to send, but after that first one, it doesn't really matter. Yeah, you put Sting the Poison in the grave for your follow-up plays so that you can revive with Papillon, but it would be cool to have like another insect that you can send that has a relevant graveyard effect when you're comboing off on turn 1, instead of just sending Sting to revive later on your opponent's turn. Speaking of Gokipole, yeah, we do play the 1 copy. Fantastic card, but it is a hard once per turn, so you don't really want to draw it because you want to send it with the Resonance Insect. It's not like the worst draw, though. It's not like a real Garnet because you can still use the effect really easily if you do happen to draw it, but I think at 1 copy it's perfectly fine. Then we have 2 copies of Retaliating Sea and 1 copy of Contact Sea. These are flex spots. I will say if I was playing in bigger events, like if regionals were going on right now or YCSs were going on right now, I'd probably play 3 copies of Retaliating Sea, but at locals, this card can be kind of awkward sometimes because while it is very good against Drytron, Prank Kids, and Shaddolls, it's not that great in other matchups. Now, it is a starter card in this deck as well if you happen to draw it alongside an extender, because then you can search the Resonance Insect and kind of keep comboing off there. But I think it's important to mention that you really want to be playing this card when you can use that hand trap effect, because when you can do that, I mean, this card is fantastic. But as it stands right now, it's okay at 2 copies. I've seen some people play 1 copy, I've seen people play 3 copies. I haven't tried out 1 copy yet, but I have played 3 and it bricked way too much. Just not a card you want to see in multiples, so I think 2 copies is fine. And then the Contact Sea, once again here, you don't have to play this card, but it is quite good against Tri-Brigade, which is the most popular deck in the metagame right now, and it's searchable off of the Retaliating Sea, but also you can add it off of Resonance Insect as well, which is pretty good. We also play 2 copies of the Baby Doomdozer and 1 copy of the Real Doomdozer. Yeah, these cards are great. I really like Worm Warrior. I bumped it up to 2 copies because even when you open like one of them, you still want to add the second one off of the Gokipole. This is one of your deck's best extenders. I know I keep saying that, but the deck has so many good extenders. But what makes this one so good is that it requires like no setup outside of having an insect monster in your graveyard. So with like Pin the Bullseye, you have to control an insect monster, but this one doesn't require you to do that. So it can be a good card when you're like halfway through the combo, just for extending your plays versus like interruptions. As for Doomdozer, I mean, yeah, this card is crazy, but it can be a brick when you draw it in your opening hand and you don't have a lot of starters. So at 1 copy, it is perfectly fine. Oftentimes on your turn 1, though, you are summoning Doomdozer multiple times because you can shuffle it back and then add it again, which is pretty funny. But at 1 copy, I think it's just fine for right now. And then we also have 1 copy of Kumongous. I'm pretty sure the Wind Kaiju is better, but I don't have that one. So this card's great. I don't think you necessarily have to main deck this card. It is a tech option, but this deck right now really lacks removal. That is one of its biggest issues besides losing to Nibiru. I'm hoping in the next set we get like a quick play spell that pops a card if you control a Beetrooper. That would be fantastic. But Kumongous is like your best removal option right now. You can search it with Resonance Insect, so I think playing 1 copy is fine, but it is one of those cards that when you go first pretty much does nothing, so I can see people not playing it in their main deck. Because I'm playing this deck at locals, I am playing hand traps. I think hand traps are good in a lot of rogue matchups, so we do play 3 copies of Ash, and as you'll see in a little bit here, we do play 3 copies of Impermanence as well. I don't think you necessarily have to play these cards, and honestly, once Crossout Designator comes out, I'll probably play 3 Crossout and then like a bunch of one-of hand traps, because honestly, it is way more important to be able to stop your opponent's hand traps than it is for you to actually have hand traps yourself. So right now it's fine, but I think in 2 weeks I'll probably cut a lot of these hand traps just because I want different hand traps for Crossout Designator. Namely, I want at least 1 copy of Nibiru in my deck to banish with that card. And then as much as I hate to say it, I do think the Dragoon engine is quite powerful in this deck. I mean, yeah, this deck loses to a lot of hand traps. Usually you can play through 1 hand trap that's not Nibiru, but sometimes your opponent has like 2 or 3 hand traps, and it's just good to have a backup plan with the Dragoon engine. You don't need this engine to play this deck, so if you are trying to make it a bit more budget friendly, this would be an engine that you would cut, but personally, I do like it a lot. It does help you with closing out games as well, and like I just said, removal is really bad in this deck, so having a Dragoon to pop 2 cards is really great. And then moving on, another expensive engine, we do have 3 copies of Ready Fusion. You don't need this engine to play this deck, but it is quite good if you can afford it. I think Primitive Butterfly is okay as a sort of replacement for this, but it's not quite as versatile versatile as Ready Fusion. The main problem is that when you go like special Primitive Butterfly, because you have to do that first, and then normal summon a Scout Buggy or a Sting the Poison, a lot of the times your opponent will no longer hand trap whatever your normal summon was, because they now see that you have 2 monsters anyway. So sometimes you can bait hand traps if you go like Scout Buggy, they hand trap it, and then you just Ready Fusion to make Armor Horn, where with Primitive Butterfly that doesn't really happen. So that is definitely a downside. Also with this card you have access to Cross Sheep, which is a great combo enabler. And finally, keep in mind here that Primitive Butterfly is pretty bad after turn 1, because you're probably always going to have at least 1 monster on the board. But you can play Primitive Butterfly. I did take Primitive Butterfly to locals and it was fine, but Ready Fusion is better if you can afford it. But honestly, I'm really hoping that Konami reprints the Hercules in the near future so that everyone can try out this engine. I'm also playing one Call by the Grave. In the future, we'll also have Crossout Designator in there, and then probably also Triple Tactics Talent. One thing with this deck that you guys should know is that I didn't go out and buy any cards that I thought would get reprinted in the Megatons, so I don't have Tactic in here already, but that's going to be a card I will add as well. I think that card is quite powerful, but right now I only have the Called by the Grave, so we just make do with what we have. And then we have 1 copy of Beetrooper Formation and 1 copy of Beetrooper Flying Sting. You only need 1 copy of these cards. They are very good, but they're also very searchable, so 1 copy is perfectly fine with those. And then finally, we have 3 copies of Infinite Impermanence. Like I said earlier, I am playing 6 hand traps right now, but you don't have to play hand traps. And going forward with Crossout Designator, I don't even know if I'll play these, but right now they're okay in the deck. I'm playing 42 cards, by the way. I think that in this deck you have a number of cards you don't want to draw, so playing over 40 is fine. For our extra deck, we have 3 copies of Beetrooper Armor Horn, probably like your most summoned Link monster in the extra deck. I don't know if you need 3 copies though. I've seen some people cut it to 2, and I think I might consider that going forward. I don't know if I've ever summoned the 3rd copy in a match. This deck usually doesn't grind out with your opponent, it just tries to OTK, so I don't know if you need 3 copies. And then we have 2 copies of the Atlas. I would probably play Access Code over one of these, but I don't have Access Code. I thought it would get reprinted in the Megatons. Apparently it didn't, so I guess I need to buy one now. But yeah, you don't need Access Code for this deck, but it does help out quite a bit because, like I've said over and over again, this deck lacks removal and Access Code is removal. And then we have 2 copies of the Inzektor Link 2. This card has 2 effects. It's great at every point in your duel. It's good when you are starting your combos. It's good when you're in the mid game. It's good when you're trying to recycle a lot of your stuff to keep going. I love this card. It's one of the best cards in the deck. 1 copy of Papillon, 1 copy of Almirage. I know people keep saying they don't summon this card, but there are like some awkward hands where you need to put an insect in the graveyard and you have no extenders, so I think Almirage is good for that reason. I have summoned it a few times, and in those cases I needed this card in my extra deck, so for now I'm probably going to keep it in there. We also have 1 copy of Cross Sheep. Like I said, this card is really great with Ready Fusion. It just gives you more ways to trigger Resonance Insect a bunch of times, so I do like this card quite a bit. 1 copy of Nightmare Phoenix because, say it with me, the deck lacks removal. Then we have Anaconda and Dragoon. Like I said, you don't need these cards to play the deck, but if you do have them, I highly recommend them. I was playing the deck without them for a little while and it was fine, but these do help out against hand traps, so I do recommend them if you do already own them. And then next we have the legend himself, Quaggar Hercules, or however you pronounce that. Don't buy this card. It's very expensive, and while Ready Fusion is very good, I'm really hoping this card gets reprinted. We have a bunch of reprint sets on the horizon. We have Brothers of Legend, we have a new OTS pack coming out to be a great spot to put this card in as a common, and also we have the next Gold Series set, which is like El Dorado or whatever. So don't buy this card unless you really need it right now. Personally, I'm planning on playing this deck at locals for the next few weeks at least, so I thought it was fine to buy, but definitely don't go out of your way to get this card if you're trying to build this deck on a budget. You can just play Primitive Butterfly and it's fine in like most situations. Ready Fusion is objectively better in pretty much every case, but Primitive Butterfly is almost as good in a lot of situations, so I think it's fine as a budget alternative. Lastly, we have 1 copy of number 3 Cicada King. You don't need 2 of this. I think 1 copy is fine. It's cool sometimes in the early stages of your combo, but also it's cool just to end on when you summon the Scout Buggy from your deck with Atlas. But yeah, that is it for the main and extra deck. I think Beetroopers have a ton of potential. This deck is so much fun to play. I really do enjoy the fact that you don't have like one end board you're trying to go for every single game. You can adjust your opening combo quite a bit for for each matchup. That is one thing I really appreciate about a deck like this. But I hope you guys enjoyed today's deck profile of Beetroopers. I'll see you later. Goodbye.